Today, we're going to explore a humble postage stamp. It exists for a single purpose to mail a letter. In today's episode of The Life of Money, we're going to find that even something as simple as mailing a letter can get awfully complicated in a world of hyperinflation. Imagine living in a country where the smallest stamp that even exists is a half a million marks. This stamp, a 1 million mark stamp, was obviously issued for an emergency. It's simple. They didn't waste any time on an engraver. In fact, there's a series that goes from 500,000 marks to 50 billion marks. Yes, billion with a B, and they all look the same, except a different denomination. So makes no money. Okay. So in this hyperinflation period, the stamps weren't even the most ridiculous part of it. Banknotes were even worse. This one, a billion, September 1923. They were in such a hurry, they just grabbed the old 1,001 and just whipped on a billion on it. It went all the way up to 100 trillion before that system collapsed. So, what gave this life? Where did this come from? So, a very brief background. Perhaps you know that what we call Germany, or think of as Germany at this point in time, was a collection of so many different states. It was kingdoms, it was bishoprics, it was duke duchies, grand duchies, free cities, landgraviates. I mean, all of these different things. But the Kingdom of Prussia was definitely the powerhouse player in this region. And so the Kingdom of Prussia kind of organized the North German Confederation. So a whole pile of these states in the northern part of what we call Germany got together for some political unity. Then again, under Prussia's leadership, they came together into this German Empire, this massive, massive domain, which extends far beyond what modern Germany would look like. This map is actually a French map from 1887, but it contains the pretty much exactly what the German Empire looked at its birth in 1871. Perhaps you're a little bit familiar with World War One. This episode isn't about World War One. This is the chaos that emerged out of World War One. On November 9th, 1918, the German Empire collapses and the Weimar Republic is declared. The Weimar Republic is smaller than the German Empire had been because there's significant territorial losses as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, which was in 1919. And in fact, the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 also laid out reparations payments for this new Weimar government, which were crushingly high. They were just unobtainable. There is a rumor, well, the Weimar Republic is named the Weimar Republic because the constitutional, the dudes that got together to write the Constitution did it in Weimar, and they continued to meet in Weimar because Berlin itself was just too unstable to hold it. But apparently in 1919, in this era, they didn't use the term Weimar Republic. Instead, the rumor says, this is a rumor, so don't take it for what it is. It was first called the Weimar Republic by Adolf Hitler in 1929 to sort of diminish the government. So here we got the stamp, and let's take a look. As I already said, there was a series with 20 different denominations, but they were identical, slightly different printing color. Okay, you can see here they put the denomination in two different ways. They put 1 million in the middle, and then they literally put all the numbers underneath. Okay, and it still says Deutsche Reich, which is an interesting transition because some I hear that the word Reich doesn't translate well. It depends on the context, but in many contexts it can be empire, so German Empire. But in this case, it feels it's more like German state or German realm or something of this nature. But it's an interesting thing that German or Deutsche Reich continued to be used from the empire into the Weimar Republic, then into the Third Reich, and to be terminated following World War II and then called just Deutsche Post. Okay, so this Deutsche Reich idea is a holdover. It's a holdover. We can also perhaps can see in the four corners there is a postal horn. And these postal horns had long been a symbol of postal authority throughout Europe. Initially, the postal horn represented the idea a postal rider would be coming in on a horse and throw out their horn, and that would tell people, clear the road, the postal is coming through. So now let's talk about a story with our stamp here. Before I can really talk about the story, I need to tell you, as I was digging in to find data to start talking about the value of 1 million marks, I found that it was very difficult to work with. But what I found was that 1913, 1914 was always used as a reference point in every data set I was looking at. So I'm going to start there, not arbitrary, because that's where the data sets start. And so I'm going to be using this, looking at this. A worker in 1913-14, an unskilled worker, their average weekly wage was 24 marks. Okay, and a loaf of bread, just to give you something, because rye bread was a big staple food, was about 28 pfennig or 0.28 marks. And therefore, just as a purchasing power number, you can see an unskilled worker could buy about 86.8 loaves per week. Now, the last number makes no sense to you yet because I haven't gotten to the story. Okay, so let's get to the story. Lotte Hendlich was a widow living in Germany. In 1919, she had a fortune of 600,000 marks. Okay, so I'll put this in perspective because so maybe now the bottom row will make sense. By 1919, the average weekly wage was 38.7 marks. A loaf of bread had doubled, right? 58 pfennig or 0.58 marks. And the purchasing power of a worker had in fact dropped, as you can see, literally in loaves of bread. Now, we haven't entered the hyperinflation period, but we definitely see the effects of World War I right here. Now, I've put the bottom row just to show you what kind of wealth Lotte Hendlich had. Her 600,000 mark wealth represented 15,503 weeks of unskilled labor. So it's a significant amount of money, okay? A significant amount. So now she goes to visit some relatives in Switzerland in 1919. And very shortly upon arrival, she falls, breaks her hip, and she's recovering from that. And then she picks up tuberculosis, and she's got a long recovery, 4 years of recovery. The whole time that her relatives were so gracious at what we're going to pay for everything. We're paying for the doctors. We're paying. So Lotte is sitting there convalescing, not thinking about her fortune that's sitting in Germany because she doesn't need it because her relatives are. So now, when she got back in 1923, there was 3 letters from the bank. Okay, the first letter was dated mid 1920. All right. And this letter said essentially it was from a banker that she was friendly with. So she knew this banker. And this banker wrote very specifically to Lotte Hendlich, um, inflation is really starting to kick in. You really should invest your funds, okay? Because putting in this savings account is just not cutting it. So we really should get together and do something about it, okay? At that point in mid 1920, weekly wage had gone up quite significantly to 72 marks a week. A loaf of bread, however, had greatly increased in price. And you can see by mid 1920 that those unskilled workers are in some pretty bad shape. That look at that. Now you can only buy 30 loaves of bread per week. And now Lotte Hendlich's wealth or her fortune is worth only 8,000 to only 8,000. Listen to me, only, but half of what it had been when she took off for her trip. The second letter that was there on arrival had been dated September 1922. And this one, this letter said, your balance has kind of dropped to the point where we don't want to service your account anymore, upon your earliest convenience, please come in and pick up your money. Okay. And so by this time, what you find is that the weekly wages had skyrocketed, but I unfortunately do not have the rye bread information at that point. The data sets were notoriously blank for this worst of the hyperinflationary periods, but you can see her wealth is now worth slightly more than 1 year of an unskilled worker's life. The last letter was dated late in 1923. It had been sent a few weeks before she had arrived. And at this point, the letter says, we we are sending you this letter to refund the balance of your account. Enclosed, find a 1 million mark banknote. It's the smallest note we can find. Um, and then she gets this letter, and then she notices that on the side to mail the letter is a 1 million mark stamp. Her entire fortune had been she had been given a bonus, right, from 600 mark, 100,000 mark to a million, and it's still. How long does it take a worker to earn this? A little over half a second. A little over half a second, and there's a million. And there's a million. I don't know how to. It's just crazy. Her fortune had been reduced to less than the price of the postage stamp. So now here we got this, and we can look at this life and the value that it holds, and we can talk about its value as postage, and the answer is none. Partly because it's been used, and partly because it's just no longer current. All right. In a Scott catalog, Scott catalogs are the standard reference for stamp collectors. In a Scott catalog, the stated value is $1.60. And it's one of those odd things because in mint condition it's worth a quarter and used it's worth $1.60 because clearly there's far more. They printed these stamps, but they became obsolete so fast that they couldn't even keep up with it. The value on eBay, you can't even find one. I tried, I searched, and it's like, no. I feel confident I could find this if I bought a larger collection of stamps and this would be included, but nobody would bother to list this stamp on eBay because its value is in fact so low. So, if you enjoyed this episode of The Life of Money, be sure to hit like and subscribe.